Anna Fleischler, the designer, full-time. I work across all her projects with her. I think that working as an associate designer is an incredible experience, and I really recommend it for any young people that are interested in getting into the industry. I worked with a director one-on-one at the university that I studied at. I studied set and costume design, and I worked with a director one-on-one. His name's Matthew Dunster, and he and I had a great relationship and we worked really well together. I finished university and I went back to Australia, and I get this email from Matthew maybe like 4 or 5 years later that said, "We're setting up a show in Australia, would you like to associate design it for Anna?" So I worked with her on that, and then after that she hired me full-time. I'd never heard of full-time associate before in Australia, but I have learnt so much working for her and seeing how a designer in a professional capacity works. And I do really recommend, if you have the opportunity, to try and shadow or work with an established designer, because it's the best way to learn. The way Anna and I work is quite collaboratively, which is really lovely. Anna really includes me in the process and the development right from the beginning. We both read the script together, separately, and Anna will then come to me with her initial ideas, the things that she first felt and thought and saw as she was reading. She writes them all down. Sometimes she puts them in mind maps. Sometimes she has a visual that she's found online straight away. It came to her while she was reading. And we have very long discussions about how we felt about the piece and means to us and what it meant to us as we were reading it. That's the first step. Then I'll usually go away and do a breakdown. And that's when you kind of deconstruct everything in the script, the props, the costumes, who, where, when, how many locations, what spaces we visit, what time periods we visit, and we put that into like a spreadsheet. So it breaks down the whole script that way, and that means we can then start to look at where we have to go and why, and you can start to look at the entire arc of the story and what we're going to have to bring to achieve that. All of the ideas and concepts that Anna brought to me, which immediately was about power structure, it was about banks and temples. A lot of it was that she felt was about how the human form interacts with a large and powerful and over-dominating space. How can that space be a corporate man-made world, that it can also be a powerful and natural world full of like tectonic shifts and deep environment, which is really rooted in Edinburgh, being based on volcanic rock. So I start researching, looking at images, we pull them together, and we start to collate pages and mood boards, and from there we keep discussing, keep growing our ideas. We have many meetings with the director, and he comes in and we all discuss together, show imagery, talk. And once Anna and the director feel like they're on the same page together, that's when I'll start to make the model box, and that's a 1 to 25 scale of the theatre. So we make a miniature of what the set's going to be, but we start that by doing a white card, and that is kind of the first rough sketch of the design. That's where we cut out kind of crude shapes and crude blocks and play with them in the space and see how that's going to feel and if the movement's going to be right, and we build from there. And lots of ideas go through that. It's like sketching, but sketching in 3D. And Anna really likes to work in that way. Some designers definitely work in the 3D world and in renderings. Anna works very strongly in visuals, cutting things out, blocking them in, tearing stuff up, and it's a really fun way to work. I love it. And through that process then we invite the lighting designer or the director and the production manager to come and see where we're at and what's possible, and keep checking in, like, is this going to work? Is this going to be possible? What are the parameters? So we have to keep that in mind as we're developing the design. And that takes us to our white card presentation. So we present what we have developed in white. The whole model is made of white. I think it's important when you are designing to know that things are going to shift and know that things are going to change, and to have flexibility in the way that you work, as long as you have a good strong core about what the concept is and why it's there and how you want to get there. There is an element, I think, of having to be flexible and going. I'm also working within a huge team where lots of people need lots of different things, and the exciting thing is those discussions that happen once you sort of leave the isolated design studio, where it's sort of just Anna and I nutting away, coming up with like mad ideas, and me really there helping realise Anna's ideas. Then you step into like the wider team and you become a group, and it becomes a new kind of collaboration, which it's exciting. It always has challenges, but it's good teamwork, and you kind of just always have to be able to ebb and flow. James Graham's writing is very fast and fluid, and we move through lots of spaces very quickly. And Anna has worked with James before, so she is used to this kind of writing. She created a space that holds strong and stays steady for the entire show. However, there are shifting and moving elements, and those were the sticking bits where a lot of discussion had to be had. For example, the lifts. That was tricky. We were bringing very, very heavy, large items onto a stage that couldn't necessarily take their weight. How many people were they going to have to hold? And we were in constant discussion, and we were constantly shifting the heights of things to adapt to these lifts coming in, which are an important part of the design, because they are kind of like the literal rise and the literal fall of the design, and supporting that in the story. It's always a really exciting moment when you come together in the tech space, the technical rehearsals, which is the first time that the set design, the costume design, the lighting design, the video design, the sound design, the illusion design, which we also have in this show, the movement work, the acting, all comes together. It's very exciting. And there was a lot of risks taken and experiments. For example, the columns that Anna designed, we used an effect on those of sanded perspex, and then within those columns, there's actually a second column that's almost covered in like a tin foil. And we literally made that in the model, and we lit it. But we didn't know if that was going to work at scale. We were hit with unprecedented 30-degree weather in Dundee. It got to like 38 degrees on stage, and all of the perspex started to warp on these pillars. So we have this the incredible head of construction, Karen, was constantly like screwing in different places to adjust it, to stop it slipping, it was crazy. And it was just, who would have known that in Dundee we were going to have 30-degree weather. But the brilliant thing about the tech spaces is that you are in this room with a whole group of incredibly intelligent, creative people to make it all work. We always have a scenic artist who's there. Leela, who is the scenic artist at the Dundee Rep, is just amazing. She's an incredibly skilled, dedicated scenic artist, and we were so lucky to have her there all the time. So that's not always the case. Not every theatre has an in-house scenic artist, and she was out there with us in the auditorium, always working on it, trying to make it better, touching things up. The lights went on the stage floor, and we went, it's not bright enough. The paint work that we did just wasn't picking up in the stage light, so we had to work out where we wanted to brighten things and reduce things. And the other thing we had to consider is the whole stage space is a surface for projection, and projection acts differently on different surfaces and different textures, and I love it. It's all the creatives coming together and being like, okay, how are we going to make this work? What do we need to do? Anna and I work very closely with the production manager. The production manager on our show, Gemma, is very, very experienced. They're the person that understands what every department is doing. And because set design and production design, we work with every single department. The set interacts with lighting, the set interacts with video, the costume interacts with acting. And so there is a kind of very broad overview that we need to have of all of it. And so we work very closely with Gemma because she's our the production manager. They're our point of connection, and they're the ones that spend an incredible amount of time brainstorming and planning and doing all the scheduling and working out how things are going to be built, and then coming back with information to us as well. It's a very important relationship. I've done a show where I haven't had a production manager and it was chaos. It can't be done and it should never be done. So they're a very, very important relationship. They're like the technical side of everything. You're the design and the visual, and they actualize the technicality of it all. For costume, I work very closely with the actors, and to me that relationship is very important and very special, and it's something that I start developing from first fittings. Well, to be honest, actually, even from the first design presentation, because I will have spent maybe weeks and weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, doing the costume drawings. The first time I meet the actors is in the design presentation, and sometimes I see the way that they move or the way that they hold themselves or their height or, you know, many things, and I go, oh, okay, I'd like to change that, it's not quite right. So I start by noticing them from that point on, and then we have our first fitting together, and that's the moment where I get to, it's quite personal fittings and it's quite vulnerable sometimes for actors, not always. So it's a space that you have to create a safe environment, but it's also where you get to learn about their thoughts on the characters and who they're playing, and that's the beginning of the collaboration of creating the character together. And I really like to work in that way, in creating a relationship with the actors. And it's important because I want them to trust me, and I want them to know that in the tech room when they're on stage and I say to them, this looks great and this doesn't look great, that they trust and believe me when I say that I have their best interest in how they're moving on the stage. It is important that, you know, they respect that it's your design up there, but it's just as important that they feel comfortable and heard and supported, because they're the ones that have to be up there performing every night. There are a lot of elements in the costume design where I went, you're not going to see these details at the back of festival theatre. You have to come to terms with, but also I believe that like putting the detail into costume, it's not just about those people in the back, it's about how it makes the actors feel, it's about how it works conceptually for the ensemble. I go to the fittings and I try the things on the actors, and then you give notes and say, I'd like this, and can we do this, and can we adjust this, and can we add this here? And then the seamstresses will take them away and work on them. And I touch base, but some of them aren't always ready, so then when they walk on stage, I go, oh, okay. And there's a billion notes that come through because, you know, we were also playing with the structure of suits, which is tricky. Suits are like a beautiful piece of art in their own right with their tailoring. And as soon as you start cutting that and messing with that and changing that, we took sleeves off one shirt and put them on another, or we did the same with the suits, or we took panels out, or we added zips to the backs of things, and we really pushed and played with the structure of things. Sometimes that worked, and then sometimes that didn't work. It's just, you know, the way things were made. So I guess it's my job to sit there and go, okay, in this light, on this stage, and how the actors are moving, particularly with all the movement that they do in this piece. The Furies do quite a lot of dance and movement. Is it functioning in the way that we need to? And that was also part of the experiment, I guess. Well, I hadn't had the experience of working with suits in that way before. You know, for example, one of the actresses, Kirsty, her shirt came on stage and it was white, and against everything else, she just popped way too much. So we go, okay, we need to dip dye that. It needs to go a darker colour. It comes back grey, and I go, we need to dip dye it again, so we take it back. But it's also really important to, I think, be really connected and understand your team and who's working for you and the hours each thing takes. You know, it's incredibly important to spend time with those people and work as a team and understand where you want to make changes and where you know, okay, that's what we decided to do and that's how it's going to be. And it's definitely a balancing game. James, these incredible sort of Greek chorus or furies into the story, and they're really there to help tell the story. They are, you know, traditionally furies are creatures spirits from the underworld who come up to earth to serve justice. They seem creature-like, but they're not inherently wicked things. They're there to set things right. However, they've come from the underworld, so there's this kind of creepiness and weirdness and cheekiness to them. that I really love. And I love that that is in this business, that James has brought that into this business world. At the beginning of the show, we're introduced to a group of tourists who are in a gallery, and there's a moment at the beginning of the show where these Greek masks come down from above. The tourists are absorbed by these Greek masks and they become the Furies on stage in front of us. So we witness that transition of, okay, the Furies have come up, they've embodied these civilians on stage and they're gonna take us on this journey. It's weird and it's dark and it's surreal. And so they become the bankers that surround this story, and those bankers are what support the story all the way through. So we wanted to remind the audience that yes, they're all these people in suits, but they also are not real, they're not human. So we added all these like kind of strange, disjointed elements to their costumes that just remind us that they're not of this world. It was very fun to do and very fun to research. I actually looked into a lot of designers in the high fashion world to see what boundaries they were pushing in terms of tailoring and structure, to see if I could be inspired for, you know, how the Furies might have like got their costumes a little bit wrong. Their business suits, you know, one of them they have shirt cuffs coming out the bottom of the trousers, or one of them has eyelets, like they've had to sort of pull a sleeve on and connect it to their suit because it's just all a bit disjointed and weird, and maybe they've never been bankers before, but in this story that's what they have to become. So there's little kind of Easter eggs throughout. And then we had the main character, Fred Goodwin, and he's just in a normal suit. The Furies are in a monochromatic world. They're all greys, blacks and whites. And it's the same as Anna's set. We wanted to feel like the Furies came from the earth, which is, you know, the rock formations that you see in the set design. They've sort of come from that. And then our main character, Fred Goodwin, is in a dark navy blue. And it's so subtle, but he really stands out, I think, in the space. We wanted to contemporize Adam Smith, and that was part of the actor Brian Cox as well. It was to do with his ideas on the character and also how we wanted Adam Smith to be relatable to the audience in that way. There's like slight humour in the fact that he's a sort of hybrid ghost from the past, but also created from Fred Goodwin's mind as this sort of half modern man, half, you know, father of economics philosopher, which was a lot of fun to develop, and Brian was quite involved in the process of that, which is always lovely. Yeah, like, you know, even originally we didn't have a wig, and then we decided to push that element with adding the wig. It was a great open discussion, which I really enjoyed, and we also really wanted to create a period silhouette. So we found a modern jacket for us to all know, okay, yeah, it's a pea coat, you know, it's a cord pea coat, we all know that. But we did little elements like popping the collar and having a really wide, large collar and, you know, quite old-fashioned buttons that make us feel like we're in the past. Even his shoes, we went for a modern shoe, but the style of buckle over the top had a more period feel to it. So we have a raised platform, and surrounding the raised platform we have these kind of built up rock sculptural shapes. If you look to the left, we have a cluster of rocks that are built from fly and gauze and, you know, natural materials. Then they've been textured and scenic art to feel like rock. Particularly on this left-hand side, the rock was inspired by those slabs that you see cut out of the earth. So it's like, you know, quite mathematically removed bricks. You can see where it's been cut out. And that's why it's got that kind of like cubist shape to it. A lot of the entrances and exits are tucked in there so that when the Furies run off stage, they kind of disappear into the earth. And as you move on to the left side, we have these large columns which were inspired by reactive metals. So when copper gets that green like lichen that grows on it, it's still a sort of slate rock large surface, but these pillars are really are there to remind us of the power structures and again the power of nature and how big and huge it can be. And then we move upstage, and we have these perspex columns. There's 6 of them, and they shift throughout the piece. The idea was, as I said before, it was a very experimental texture that we made with them, made of perspex with a sort of silvery interior. To be honest, they were kind of inspired by installation art and something that we don't know what it is. We don't know how it lights up. We don't know what it functions as. But, you know, they were inspired by the Greek columns and pillars that we see on Carlton Hill, also in banks, those like big structures. But Anna abstracted them and made them quite ethereal and adaptable in the environment. And then we have the floor, which is like again, texturally, it's a sort of sheet metal, and that's where our lifts raise up and down. Then we have lots of stairs for access, but also to play with the idea of height, and we could create rooms with the lifts moving and the stairs. So I think if theatre can affect anyone and cause emotion in anyone, that's a total win. That's you know, it's about feeling and understanding and experiencing. And when I say emotion, I don't necessarily mean like crying or a negative thing, but, you know, just having a response and learning something new.